We are back to this live conversation on the U.S. Embassy page. Thank you for still being here. We apologize for power cut. We hope that it won't happen anymore, and we will be able to continue our conversation with Ambassador Pelletier, Ambassador to Madagascar and Comoros in this eTafa. Good afternoon, Mr. Ambassador, and thank you for answering the questions.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you to everybody for participating and for their patience with the power cut. I hope we'll be okay for the next hour or so to have a really great conversation.
Already mentioned, we will talk about what happened in 2020, and you will also introduce how the partnership between Madagascar and the United States will look like this new year, 2021. The followers have been asked questions. We've gathered them, and they will be expecting an answer from you. For those who still have questions with other topics, you are kindly asked to ask questions, because the second part, the ambassador will bring answers to those. This discussion will be in Malagasy. Thanks, a special thanks to interpreters. So to start with, Mr. Ambassador, we all know what happened in the United States last week, which is the oath of the new president, the 46th president, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris. She's the first female, Black, and South Asian vice president. Can you talk a little bit about that moment and what happened in the United States since their election?
Sure. Well, it was a very exciting week last week for all Americans, as every inauguration day is. This year's was very different, of course, for a variety of reasons, and this year's transition was a little more difficult and a little more exciting than we're used to. But I think, really, for me, two key messages, two key lessons came through. The first is the importance and the power of institutions in any democracy. Seeing the Supreme Court, the different members of Congress, the former presidents and others, all there on the patio at the Capitol building, swearing in President Biden and Vice President Harris, showed that despite any difficulties, those institutions and the roles that each of them play are really essential. They're essential to our democracy, just as institutions are essential to any democracy. And that, I thought, came through really loud and clear during the events of last week and previously. The second really strong message that I took away was the importance and the real vitality of the diversity and inclusivity of the United States, of our culture, of our society. Not just, as you mentioned, by the choice of Kamala Harris as the first woman, African-American, South Asian origin Vice President of the United States, which of course is terribly exciting. But also when you look at the diversity of the team that President Biden has called together to help him in his task as he takes over the reins as President of the United States. The historic number of women, of minorities, and others who are part of the team now. It really speaks to the strength of diversity in America and to the great strength that we draw from that diversity in America. So those are really, I think, the two lessons and the two really exciting messages that I took from the inauguration last week.
Still talking about the U.S. politics in the United States, we've received a question, and we thank that person, Christian, asked a question about how do you see the relationship, the partnership between the United States and Madagascar now that the Democrats have come to power again?
Sure. Well, I think our partnership with Madagascar and with Africa generally is one that really goes beyond political parties. It is something that is a continuity to U.S. policy. And particularly here in Madagascar, when I look at Malagasy-American relations, I think of the saying that we all are using here at the embassy now, which is Piaralai Mianale Sika. Yanao tukiku izao tukinao, which is the idea that we really are together. We are siblings, we are brothers and sisters, working together over the years, whether you're talking about a Democratic administration in the United States or a Republican administration in the United States. And so, for example, it was under President Obama, a Democratic president, that we became the largest bilateral partner in the field of health assistance here in Madagascar. And that continues through President Trump, and it continues to be the fact today that the United States, regardless of a Democratic administration or a Republican administration, is the largest provider of health assistance to Madagascar. So I think when you look at details like that, you see the continuity of our commitment to Madagascar and to the partnership that we have built with Madagascar, regardless of the politics in the United States. And that's true when you're talking of health, when you're talking of water and sanitation, when you're talking of our efforts against malaria, in so many areas. We've been a proud, strong partner for years, and I hope we will continue to be. I know we will continue to be in the future.
It's very reviving. So when we talk about 2020, we've all witnessed COVID-19. Here in Madagascar, we've been living, but for the U.S. government, the U.S. government has brought help to Madagascar to face against the pandemic, the COVID pandemic. There are a criticism that says that the help did not reach those most in need. Can you, Mr. Ambassador, remind us of U.S. efforts to fight the coronavirus here in Madagascar?
Sure. Well, I think, as you say, all of us all around the world have been fighting the pandemic this past year, and the United States is very proud that around the world we've been able to support the efforts of partners like Madagascar in their fight against the pandemic. Here in Madagascar, as I just said, the United States is very proud to be the most important bilateral partner in the field of health. Which really means building up health systems. It means training health workers. It means providing networks and helping them to trace and contacts, to follow the progression of the disease. And so sometimes it's efforts which aren't always obvious to everybody, to the man and woman in the street, but it's those institutions, the strength of institutions, the strength of systems, which really matters. And we've been very dedicated to that for years, and over the past year of COVID, we've been more committed to that than ever before. In addition, we provided $2.5 million of supplementary aid or redirected aid to Madagascar to help Madagascar really focus on the pandemic and the effects of COVID. And that included a substantial contribution to the Tusika Fameno program, which provided social support to people who were really struggling economically because of COVID. And I know that we continue to look for ways where we can help Madagascar to move past the pandemic and get back on the road to economic stability and growth.
Ny fiatrehana ny valanaretina COVID-19 moa iny niraisana
So
maneran-tany.
I mentioned earlier that we've been all facing COVID, but at the end of the year, Madagascar has faced food insecurity, especially those in the south of Madagascar, and the U.S. government was present. They gave $100 million to face food insecurity. Would you mind coming back to that topic? And we've been receiving questions related to that. Can you provide an overview of this assistance?
Sure. Well, first of all, let me say I had the chance to travel to the deep south, to Andrui and Atsimo and Drefna, and see the situation on the ground. And I know just how serious the situation is in the south, and I know I've spoken to the president and to others here in Tana about the situation, and I know that they and we all take the situation very, very seriously. As we announced with President Rajoel last month, the United States is very pleased to be able to announce a number of programs to help in the South with the food insecurity situation there. Most immediately, I should mention a $10 million program called Firanga. Firanga is there to provide food assistance to 222,000 people in the regions of Andrui and Atsimo and Drefna. And that is a real kind of an emergency, immediate step to try to provide assistance. We also announced 2 longer-term programs, 2 5-year programs of $45 million each, which are there to provide more food security and support for food security in the South. One of them is a project which we call Maharu, which is in Atsimo and Drefna and Andrui. And the other is a program called Fiuvana, which is in the 2 regions of Atsimo Atsinanana and Vatuvavi Fituvanani. And those programs, I think, are particularly important to focus on because they not only focus on the immediate food insecurity problems in the South, but they also start to think about the longer-term development challenges and the longer-term development efforts of the government of Madagascar and of all of us, the partners of Madagascar, so that the South can develop in a more sustainable and long-term fashion. So through all of these programs, we really try to help solve the immediate problems and crisis, but also to lay the foundations for support for the government's long-term efforts and long-term goals for development in the South.
You've mentioned about long-term solution, but one of our followers, Frank Hanevmanen, expressed his appreciation for this assistance from the U.S. government, but he pointed out that it is in response to emergency. And now he wants to know how the United States does the United States has a long-term solution for climate change or environmental conservation or about joblessness.
Sure. No, I think he's absolutely right to focus on these longer-term issues. For us, the way we talk about it is sustainable self-reliance. We want, for the good of Madagascar, for the good of the region, and for everyone's own good, really, to help Madagascar to become sustainably self-reliant over the long term, to be able to develop its economy, to develop its institutions and its systems so that those long-term issues can be dealt with. And as Paul very rightly mentions, a key to that is the question of the environment, for example, and climate change. And we've already seen on day one in office, President Biden took the step of announcing that the United States would be returning to the Paris climate control agreement, climate change agreement, to be part of that global international effort. He also named John Kerry, our former Secretary of State, and a man who's really known for being committed to climate change or to fighting climate change and committed to the environment, to be his special envoy on climate issues. And so I think President Biden made it very clear as soon as he got to the White House after being sworn in, that these long-term issues like climate change and protecting the environment were really going to be key to the U.S. government's engagement in the coming years to finding these long-term solutions to these development challenges.
Talking about long-term solutions, one of the most famous is about traffic of gold from Madagascar. Cyprien Toumb and Rakrav, two of our followers, talked about that, and they asked what the United States, what American people can do to help protect Madagascar to help Madagascar protect natural resources from illegal trafficking.
Sure. Well, I think, as I just said, this idea that Madagascar needs to be able to be sustainably self-reliant in the long term, part of that, a really important part of that, is making sure that Madagascar can protect its natural resources and can benefit from its natural resources so that the amazing wealth of this island can be used for the benefit of its people. And for that reason, we and many others have really been working to help the government of Madagascar protect those resources against all sorts of trafficking. Whether you're talking about the gold and other minerals that are trafficked, or natural resources, rosewood, different endangered species. There are many of these networks, unfortunately, of traffickers. And we are really interested in seeing how we can help Madagascar to combat those traffickers so that Madagascar can protect its own resources. We think that investigating such cases of trafficking, holding people accountable when they are found guilty of trafficking is really, really very important. And in fact, the United States has a number of laws and regulations which restrict, for example, giving visas to people who are part of those trafficking networks of wildlife or of rosewood or animals, so that there are tools that we have that can be used to really restrict those people from traveling to the United States. I would also mention we have two really big USAID projects in Madagascar that are in place to help the Malagasy authorities and the Malagasy people to protect their natural resources. Both Haitao and Mikazi, which are two major projects that we have, are there to help Madagascar come up with environmental policies which protect the natural resources and help people to understand how to benefit from them responsibly. And as well as Mikazi, which is the other major project that we have that looks at policies and efforts to protect Madagascar's resources. So we're there as a positive partner in that field of environmental protection as well.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for those explanations. Talking about other topic, one of one of the signs of the presence of the United States is the presence of Peace Corps volunteers. We knew that last year, we had to ask them to go back to the United States, and we have some club like Sunrise English in Muhamang who are very active in our page. They are asking when the Peace Corps volunteers will come back to Madagascar.
Yeah, we're all anxious for that day, and I would say not just us here in Madagascar, but frankly all over the world where there were Peace Corps volunteers, and those volunteers were recalled to the United States at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. I know that all over the world people are anxious to get their volunteers back, just as we're anxious to get them back, and they are anxious to get back. Here in Madagascar, we had volunteers in the fields of health, agriculture, and education. And I hope and trust that as soon as the health situation permits, much like all the other countries that had volunteers around the world, we'll be able to welcome back our own volunteers here. I think we'll start Mura Mura and bring them back, but we all look forward to that day because they really just, as well as their efforts to support local development projects, that cultural people-to-people link that the Peace Corps volunteers are able to establish with Malagasy across the island are really, really difficult to replace. And so we look forward to saying Tungaso to all of them when they can come back.
Yeah.
That's the answer, dear Sunrise English Club. But one of our followers, Kevin Taunas, he is asking a question. He really wants to continue his studies in the United States. So he's asking, what are the opportunities exist for Malagasy students who are interested in continuing their studies in the U.S.?
I think the United States has great opportunities for higher studies for people from all over, including people from Madagascar. One of the strengths of our system in the United States is that there's so much choice and so much flexibility in terms of where you study, what you study, and frankly, how much it costs to study in the United States. I think a lot of people get worried about the cost of it, and I think it's important for people to realize that you really have to do a lot of research and look into it, because you will find a program that will fit your needs and your interests and your budget if you really try and you really do the research. We have a system across the world called Education USA that provides assistance in doing that sort of research, in finding out about studying in the United States, in really kind of examining all of the choices that you have. You can start off online. Of course, nowadays with the pandemic, we're all learning to do all of it online. And if you want to succeed at a university, you need to be able to succeed in doing research online. I'm going to look down at my notes to give you the site. It's on Facebook at Education USA Madagascar. You go to that site, and that's a great place to start learning about what you need to do to study in the United States. And I think my colleagues will make sure we put that Facebook reference on the chat for those of you who are on Facebook. So you can start by logging into Facebook, going to Education USA Madagascar, and start your research. And it's a big job to do all that research, but I think when you do it, you'll find it's worth its while. And I'd encourage everyone to really give it a consideration.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. I remind those on Facebook that we will continue. There is eTafa for those who are willing to study in the United States. So Mr. Ambassador has already reminded us how to communicate with those person in charge. Before taking questions from our followers, there is a question apart from the studies. Are there any professional development opportunity that the United States offer to Malagasy young people?
Sure, there are actually a number of opportunities, and I think it's a really important question and a really important part of our partnership of working together is this idea of training the youth and providing them with skills so that they can contribute. On the academic front, our best known program is probably the Fulbright program, which provides a very limited number of scholarships to people to go and pursue further studies in the United States. There's also really one of our better known programs now is called the Young African Leaders Initiative, YALI, which is a program that includes all sorts of different opportunities. There are Mandela scholarships where people actually travel to the States and do internships, but there's also the opportunity to follow courses online, to follow courses in the regional training centers across Africa. And so very rapidly we've been able to build up a network of thousands of young African leaders across the continent who work together and then support each other in really, really fascinating ways. And here in Madagascar and in Comoros, I've had the opportunity to meet so many Young African Leader Initiative alumni, people who have participated in the program. They are incredibly motivating and incredibly inspiring when you see what they've done and what they're going to do. And so I would say to all of our friends who are watching today, look up YALI, look up Young African Leaders Initiative, be in touch with some of those contacts and those networks. You can find out more about those programs and others on our website, which is MG for Madagascar, mg.usembassy.gov for government. Again, we'll put that address on our chat in Facebook. But go to mg.usembassy.gov and find out about these and other opportunities. But I'd also just add one word. I've met young people across the island when we could travel before COVID who have been able to really develop amazing skills, leadership skills, English language skills, presentation skills, people who've put together really fascinating local development projects with very little resources, their main resource being their intelligence and their heart and their effort. And so I would encourage people not to get discouraged when you see the challenges that are in front of you, but recognize the heroes and champions of Madagascar that exist across this country who are really doing amazing things. And we'd love to hear about that. We'd love to be able to support them. But I know there's a lot they can do on their own too.
Yeah.
Young people are really inspired by those words. And thank you, Mr. Ambassador. You've mentioned already about Fulbright program. The application has opened on January 19th. Until March 19th, you can send your application for those who are interested on Fulbright program. We've already mentioned the website for the application on U.S Education Madagascar, the Facebook page, or the website mg.usembassy.gov if you want to look at the details. most of the topics have already been discussed. But if our followers have questions, any questions from our audience? One question from Charla Ertin from Toamasina. Mr. Ambassador, we want TOEFL program. They are willing to work with the U.S. Embassy to have TOEFL examination in Toamasina.
So the TOEFL exam is run by a private organization, and they have their own partners in different parts of the world, in different cities around the world. I know that their, their capacities are limited, but I would encourage you all to work through the existing TOEFL centers here and through your universities and others. First of all, to continue to work on your English, but also to see about how much demand there is in Madagascar and what the possibilities are in Madagascar. I know that it can be frustrating, and around the world I know that the opportunities can be somewhat limited, but it's part of the ETS's system to really have very strict controls so that the tests are reliable. And so let me just leave it at that, but also just to really encourage you ultimately, the key thing to do is to really work on your English and keep up your studies. Don't be shy. I've met so many Malagasy who sort of say, oh, I'm sorry, my English isn't good, and then they proceed to speak absolutely beautiful English. So use your English, practice your English, and that's the most important thing you can do to prepare.
Mety misy fanontaniana hafa ve?
Fanontaniana manaraka avy amin'ny Andriamasinjaka Wang.
Next question is from Andriamasinjaka. How about crowdfunding is very difficult that we used 5 years ago. How can we partner, invest, about investment?
Sure. So, there are a number of things to think about. There are a number of American companies and others who have invested and who are interested in investing here in Madagascar. We believe very strongly in the importance of private sector-led development. That is, development really comes from an active, vibrant private sector. And I know that I've spoken to many in the government here who agree with that vision and are working to encourage that vision here in Madagascar. I would say that I've also run into a number of Malagasy business people who are very interested in training and supporting the next generation of business leaders and of entrepreneurs and innovators here in Madagascar. There are a number of startup centers and of training centers that really focus on providing those business skills to the next generation. So I would encourage you all, if that's the field you're interested in, to take advantage of every opportunity you can to look at those centers that exist, to learn about the importance of putting together a business plan, of attracting financial support, of understanding and defining what it is you want to do. And I think with the level of energy that I've seen, that all of us see across Madagascar, and with the amazing ideas and energy that particularly Madagascar's youth has, I think there's no end to the possibilities. Again, it's not easy, but it's really, really gratifying, and it's really, really promising.
As we've already shared on Facebook, you've mentioned as well that I want to remind for those who want to enter on entrepreneurship, there are free training in English or in French offered by YALI network. We will share the website to you, yali.state.gov. You can, so if you are an entrepreneur and you want to develop your skill, this is something the U.S. Embassy can share. Other questions? A question from Fianarantsoa from André Rangi. Fianarantsoa is one of the biggest region who have students interested in English. We don't have American corner. How can we get an American corner in Fianarantsoa?
So I would say the most important thing is to continue to work together and set up your own group and set up your own network in Fianar, a beautiful city known for its educational background and its focus on education. So it doesn't surprise me that you have a bunch of people there who want to use their English. I would say the most important thing, as I said earlier, is to use it. Get together amongst yourselves. Nothing is stopping you. Let us know what you're doing. Make a Facebook group, like the Facebook group we spoke to earlier from Moramanga, and let us know what your activities are. We would love to be able to provide as much support as possible to groups across the country. Our resources are limited, and of course travel is limited, but there's really nothing to stop you from getting together. And let us know what you're up to and what you're interested in. I know that my colleagues here at the embassy do a number of programs now online, either through Facebook or other sources, so that you can have conversations or participate in conversations in English with different experts, with Americans, or with Malagasy, who have been part of our different programs. And so that's something that a group, even an informal group of friends, can get together and participate in, and I think you'd find really, really supportive of your efforts. So I say just congratulations, and to keep up the good work, and take it into your own hands and put something together.
Yeah.
More questions with different topics? They are really welcomed. A question from Lantsura Zevason. Thank you to U.S. citizens for all your help. When there are programs funded by USAID, most of the time they are not dealing with priority. What might be the reason? Is it from the USAID or from NGO who are implementing the projects?
So we try to put together all of our programs based on conversations with the government to see where the government's development priorities are, as well as looking at where we have value added, where we have strong programs that can help contribute to Madagascar's efforts. And so right now, I've already mentioned several times our work on the health field as Madagascar's largest partner in the field of health. We also mentioned earlier our programs on the environment and protecting Madagascar's natural resources. And then we also have a number of programs which we discussed a little bit when we were talking about the South, where we have programs focused on food security and agriculture and sustainable agriculture across Madagascar. All of those programs are long-term programs. We try always to work with a variety of local partners, as well as implementing partners from the United States. Some of those are religious organizations, civil society organizations, universities, others. We have a number of partnerships with the various UN organizations, with UNICEF, with the World Food Program, etc. People and organizations who are really expert in getting these programs implemented well and following up on them. And so we have lots of partners across Madagascar working in all of these fields, and we hope that working together with them, working together with the government of Madagascar, and most importantly, and I mean that very seriously, working most importantly with the people of Madagascar, we hope that we can contribute to your development efforts. As I said earlier, we like to say at the embassy, Piaralai mianala isika, and we really believe it's an isika. We're all in this together.
Yeah,
You will be hearing to this proverb, Pralamianalaisik. We will. Other questions? Question from Taulangar. Mr. Ambassador, after the riots in the United States, how do you see the future of democracy in the United States? Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It was a very difficult time in the United States, but for me, the most important thing that we saw after the riots in early January, the effort, the takeover by some people of Capitol Hill during the counting of the presidential votes. To me, the most important thing that we saw was as soon as the police and the security forces had cleared out the House, all of the senators, all of the representatives went right back and continued their work and met their constitutional responsibilities, counted the votes, and declared the winner of our presidential election. That evidence of the strength of the institutions and the strength of the individuals following those procedures and performing their duties was a really strong message that despite difficulties, the democratic system would continue. I've said to people over the course of my 30-year career that democracy is never easy. And I think we see that in many countries, and we see that in the United States. But people's dedication to expressing their opinions, to voting, and the strength of the institutions to count those votes and to make a democracy work is really, really essential and is really, really heartening. It gives you confidence, and it gives you a strong heart when you see it. And so that's why earlier I spoke about the strength and the emotion of watching on January 20th President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris be sworn in on Capitol Hill with the Supreme Court, the members of Congress, the former presidents, everyone there watching. It really reinforced for all of us the strength of our democracy despite any challenges, and our faith and our commitment to that democracy. So I think democracy grows and is strengthened every time you have a transition, you have an election, and I think democracy is still the best system we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Ambassador, for this answer. Our followers had the opportunity to follow the inauguration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, Vice President, as you mentioned. It happened peacefully. So that brings us to the end of today's conversation. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation And thank you to the followers for their questions, for your interest to follow the partnership between Madagascar and the United States. Mr. Ambassador, remind us always about Pelletier.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity, really. As I've said to many people before, my favorite part, and I think the most important part of being an ambassador, is being able to travel around the country, to meet people, to hear their thoughts, to talk about their concerns. And of course, due to the COVID pandemic, we've not been able to do that very much this year. And so I'm super grateful that we have these technologies, that we have Facebook, that you're all able to put this together to allow us to at least stay in touch virtually, online. And I hope that everyone is being careful, keeping safe and keeping healthy, wearing your masks, keeping your hands clean, practicing physical distancing, and staying healthy and keeping your loved ones healthy, so that soon we can all again meet in person. But until then, I'll just say misocha betsika, and see you again soon.
Misotra betsaka tompoko manaraka indray. Velo.